Coming up, one-man controversy machine 30p Lee Anderson has been appointed deputy chair of the Conservative Party by Rishi Sunak, the man who promised us integrity, professionalism and accountability at every level. Within 48 hours of his appointment, Anderson, also a Tory MP, vigorously backed the death penalty, called for a naval standoff in the Channel over the small boats, and aggressively threatened a radio reporter on BBC Nottingham and accused her of being dishonest.
Well, just answer the question, please. Have you ever told a lie?
I mean, what do you mean? We, as humans, you tell false truths to protect people.
So you're a
you
liar.
say false truths.
So you're dishonest.
Okay, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you for your time.
I'm asking you now not to play it.
Why are you asking me that?
Because I can't trust you to play the whole lot and be fair to me. We're supposed to be talking about my role as a chair. But no, you're not.
Well, then we can just play that bit out.
No. Listen, please listen. We're supposed to be talking about my role as deputy chairman, not the other stuff.
But it all kind of
So you went off at a tangent. If I'd known that. No, it doesn't. It might do to you, but to me it doesn't. I came in to talk about, as a favour to you, to talk about my role as the deputy chair. So don't play it, please. If you do, I will never give you anything again.
This is pretty much representative of Lee Anderson's political career, something that Rishi Sunak must have been aware of, despite his promise of
integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level.
Stay tuned for an in-depth look at the intellectually challenged Lee Anderson's career, his political views, how he got the nickname 30p Lee, and how his appointment tells us everything we need to know about the Tory Party in 2023. If you enjoy watching the Truth to Power channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd help me out by hitting the like button and especially by sharing a link to this video on your social media platforms. As I was writing the notes for this video just 48 hours after Lee Anderson's appointment, Rishi Sunak was busily popping up on various news outlets, desperately trying to distance himself from the new Tory deputy chair who has spoken strongly in support of the death penalty. Sunak told reporters, "That's not my view, that's not the government's view," with a Downing Street spokesperson quick to remind journalists and the public that Mr Anderson, while deputy chair of the Tory Party now, was not actually a member of the government. So what did Anderson actually say? Quote, "Nobody has ever committed a crime after being executed. You know that, don't you? 100% success rate." He apparently thinks it's funny to joke about executions, that such jokes are great because perhaps they might upset woke, lefty, liberal snowflakes. I assume that his 100% figure also includes, in his mind, those who were wrongly convicted and subsequently hanged, of which there have been a whole series of cases in British criminal history, and that's according to the gov.uk website itself. Something that doesn't worry Lee Anderson, as he is often unable to grasp the subtleties of this or any other issue. As to whether there might be an argument over possible miscarriages of justice, he added, "Now, I'd be very careful on that one because you'll get the certain group saying you can never prove it. Well, you can prove it if they have videoed it and are on camera." Common sense there from Lee Anderson, who has clearly never heard of deep fakes or the concept of being framed. He's also unaware that when the UK had capital punishment, jurors would regularly find murderers not guilty in court as they disagreed with capital punishment and refused to condemn a fellow human being to death. But that's the problem with common sense thinking. It doesn't do the necessary cerebral heavy lifting. It's this simplistic black and white mindset that delivered the vote for Britain to leave the European Union. And Lee Anderson is very much a black and white kind of guy, like all his fellow members of the so-called common sense group of Conservative MPs, famous for their campaign to prohibit the National Trust from telling the true history of the properties they manage. In particular, National Trust properties' connection with colonialism and historic slavery. Anderson and the rest of the Common Sense group accused the National Trust of being coloured by cultural Marxist dogma, which led to the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism issuing a briefing paper to all Conservative MPs warning against using the term cultural Marxism as it may inadvertently act as a dog whistle for the far right. Again, I can't imagine for 1 minute that Anderson would be able to grasp the subtle cause and effect, and even if he could, I'm not sure it would bother him one bit to be associated with the far right. To oppose the so-called Common Sense group of Tory MPs, I think the Progressive Party should set up a group of MPs called the I think you'll find it's a bit more complicated than that group. They'll need a catchier title given, so any suggestions welcome in the comments below, please. Another example of Lee Anderson's so-called common sense thinking was his idea to put antisocial public housing tenants in tents and use them as slaves to pick vegetables in this campaign video from 2019.
My plan would be, and again this is just my own personal opinion, is that these people who have to live somewhere, let's have them in a tent in the middle of a field, 6 o'clock every morning, let's have a walk, let's have them in the fields, picking potatoes or any current seasonable vegetables, back in the tent, cold shower, lights out, 6 o'clock, the same the next day. That would be my solution.
Before campaigning as a Tory MP, Anderson started off as a long-time member of the Labour Party and was elected as a councillor in 2015. He was suspended 3 years later amid allegations of misogyny and racism, and after receiving a community protection warning for using boulders to block members of the traveller community from setting up camp at a site in the area. After being suspended by Labour, Anderson defected to the Conservative Party and soon after began campaigning as the prospective parliamentary candidate for Ashfield, Nottinghamshire. Subsequently trailed around his constituency by the Daily Mail's Michael Crick and a camera crew, Anderson won support for his views from a man on the doorstep. But there was a snag, which came to light afterwards. Thick as mince Anderson forgot that he was wearing a radio mic when he was recorded phoning the man on the doorstep in advance, telling him to
just make out you don't make out you know who I am. You know I'm the candidate, but not a friend. All right. Hiya.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Lee Anderson, your parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party. How you doing? I recognise you. It's Steve, isn't it? Yeah, I recognise you. How you doing, mate? All right.
Yes, I'm
just doing a bit of last-minute campaigning. Are you going to be voting on December the 12th? And do you mind me asking which way you're going to go this time?
Well, I'm going with you. I watched that video.
Yeah.
What do you mean, putting antisocial people in tents?
Yeah, I didn't.
He's
I
not
think
allowed
you
to
were a bit
talk about
soft.
that now.
I think you're a bit soft on it. To be
A bit soft?
Yeah.
What would you do then?
I'd get cat and iron tails for.
In 2021, Anderson announced that he wouldn't watch any of England's matches during the European Championship tournament in protest at the players' decision to take the knee before matches. He reckoned that this gesture against racism risked alienating traditional supporters, as he claimed it supported Black Lives Matter, which in his opinion is a political movement whose core principles aim to undermine our very way of life. The England footballers said it was a unanimous team decision to take the knee as a simple gesture against racism, and that it had no connection whatsoever in their minds to the Black Lives Matter movement. But Lee Anderson claims to know more about why they chose to make the gesture than the actual footballers do themselves. He really isn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, is he? The following year, 2022, Anderson said that the majority of migrants crossing the English Channel illegally were economic migrants. When told that the Home Office itself had evidence that the majority were genuine refugees, he accused migrants of lying to falsely seek asylum. This week, he repeated his belief that the small boats in the Channel were the top priority for government, ahead of the cost of living crisis, the NHS in meltdown, and the wave of industrial action bringing the nation to a halt. No, those desperate people risking their lives in dinghies in the Channel were the focus of all his vitriol. A quick visit to the campaigns page of his own website reinforces this, with the imaginatively titled Lee Anderson's Illegal Immigration Survey taking pride of place at the very top. If up to this point you had any doubt of his limited intellectual capacities, a quick read of the questions in his survey provides further evidence that he is extremely hard of thinking. Do you think we should send them back the same day, even if it means breaking international law? Seems like the sort of question an extremely thick gobshite would put to someone sitting next to him at the bar, down at the local pub. And don't get me wrong, I've been known to go to pubs myself. But in my experience, even a random pub regular on the receiving end of such a question would want to deliver his or her answer with some nuance, some qualification, some explanation, some proviso. But in the Lee Anderson Illegal Immigration Survey, the question, do you think we should send them back the same day, even if it means breaking international law, demands a yes-no answer. That's what being a member of the common sense group of Tory MPs does for you. Everything is black and white. Then we have, do you think the people crossing the channel are genuine asylum seekers or economic migrants? Lee, if even Suella Braverman's Home Office are telling you that they are mainly genuine asylum seekers, why are you even bothering to ask such a dumb question on the internet? And I must just cover this next doozy of a question. How do you feel about illegal immigrants stroke asylum seekers staying in hotels? Well, first of all, we have the ignorant tabloid phrase illegal immigrants when there's no such thing. People aren't illegal. And someone's presence in Britain only becomes illegal once that person has been refused asylum, lost any appeals, and yet continues to stay here. But it's the available responses to this question that really crack me up. Angry? Angry but they need to stay somewhere, or I have no problem with it. In Lee Anderson's head, there's nothing in between being angry about something or having no problem with it. Common sense thinking in practice. No sense of nuance. No sense of subtlety, no requirement to actually put one's brain in gear and think a little bit. It's little over a week ago that leaked messages from a Conservative MP's WhatsApp group showed Anderson castigating Rishi Sunak and his ministers for failing to robustly tackle small boats crossing the channel. It's like the band on the Titanic playing the same tune and ignoring the obvious. He told the common sense group of Conservative MPs, adding that any civil servants who obstructed efforts to reduce migration should be seen as having committed treason. Man, has this guy got a problem with foreigners. Now, onto that nickname, 30p Lee. For those of you who may not know, in May 2022, Anderson was criticised by opposition MPs and the food poverty campaigner Jack Munro for suggesting that there was not a massive use for food banks in the UK, and what use there was caused by a lack of budgeting and cooking skills. Royal College of Nursing General Secretary Pat Cullen responded that to criticise anybody using a food bank is disgusting, heartless and dangerously out of touch. Anderson invited opposition MPs to visit a food bank in his constituency where he said that meals could be made for 30p a day and which also provided a mandatory teaching course to its users. The actual fact is, the cooking course turns out not to have been mandatory at all. It was an add-on service, and the 30p per head figure was arrived at by splitting the costs of a meal, catering for hundreds, prepared on an industrial scale, with bulk purchase of ingredients from a wholesaler, prepared with industrial ovens and professional catering equipment. Experts across the catering industry say that such a cost could never be matched in a domestic setting. So the nickname 30p Lee has followed him around ever since. Anderson just won't accept that there's a cost of living crisis. There's no poor people, only those who can't budget or can't cook. He recently used his own personal assistant, Katie Colthup, as an example, sending out this tweet saying she could manage fine on a modest salary in London. There again, young Katie is single, has no dependents, and lives in one room in a house of multiple occupation. Not exactly living the dream, and not great if she wants to have kids or find a place of her own. Katie makes my point really well, says Anderson. What point he's actually making is a little unclear. What Katie has to do with a widowed mother struggling to bring up 4 children, or a young couple trying to save up for a home and to start a family, or someone unable to work due to ill health, I'm not sure. Unless he's implying that everyone who uses a food bank is lying about needing help, or is leading an irresponsible life where they waste money on flat-screen tellies, cigarettes and iPhones. The wonderful James O'Brien talked about this very tweet on his LBC morning show this week, saying that Katie's boss basically announced to the world that the details of her life are now fit for public consumption. Many people on Twitter, plus the Daily Mail no less, have delved into Katie's background and discovered that she attended a private school with annual fees in excess of £30,000, that her father was awarded a CBE, was a brigadier in the army, was the director of operations for all army recruiting, and is now the chief operating officer of York Minster. Her mother is the chief executive of a charity in Yorkshire. James O'Brien pointed out that this blameless young woman is not really a poster girl for living on a pittance, adding, "So that has rather blown up in Lee Anderson's face, as you would perhaps expect." I actually feel a little bit sorry for Katie Coulthard personally. Lee Anderson has the highest turnover of staff in the House of Commons. That's 7th highest out of 650 members. That's in the top 1.1%. That's high, but with everything we know about 30p Lee, maybe not that surprising. Part of Mr Anderson's role as Deputy Chairman of the Tory Party will be to appear on the media to push the government's agenda in the run-up to the local elections in May. What could possibly go wrong?